Hitting record.
How's everything going? Good?
Yeah, not too bad. It was a steady day. You know, nice weather, people coming out. We moved some mead.
A lot of people coming out.
Yeah, we moved some mead, which was good. How are you guys today?
Good. It's kind of weird because we're Indiana entered a different phase this week. So we're now in what's called phase 2. I guess that's limited opening. But what's weird with us is we never closed because we're a food producer. Technically, wine is a food.
Okay.
So we never really closed, and all these other places are starting to open. So it's funny. We had a game plan, and then now we'll have to adjust. Okay, I see. How do I see different screens here? Let's see what we got. So is anyone drinking the Bali High tonight? Sweet, awesome. How do you like it?
It's very good. I just opened it up. It's excellent.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I can't wait to hear how you made it when Eric gets back.
Yeah, that sounds good. Have you had our mead called Frost?
I have.
Frost
it's very good.
Yeah.
Frost 3, I think.
Kind of reminiscent. Yeah, exactly. I think this is kind of reminiscent of that in the structure. So it has a lot of similarities as far as mouthfeel, and then like as far as the acidity and sweetness, they're very similar. So it's kind of constructed the same way as Frost, but totally different in the use of the fruit.
Yeah, the profile is definitely different, but it's fantastic.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's see if anybody else shows up late for their pickups. That's been our craziness today. So I am recording, so we're good to go. We're getting some people in. Clint, we had a Zoom bomber last week, so I have to admit everybody at this point, which is always fun. We had a good time with that last week. Thankfully, there was nothing inappropriate about it, which is good. Thank you, man, for coming on today. This is because I got your email last week saying you were dropping this. So those that don't know Clint Wadsworth, he is the owner, proprietor. What do you call a mead maker? Is it a mead maker? It's not a brewer. What do you call yourself?
Well, there's a lot of different terms that people use. Yeah. What I call myself, I just call myself a brewer. I just think of myself as, just within the craft beer community. And so I think of myself as a brewer, although we do make, something different, but we're really connected to those folks. Other terms that people call themselves are like mazer, which technically mazer is, that's the bowl that was a traditional serving vessel for mead, but somehow the term became used for the person who makes the mead, but it's not totally accurate. But for me, that seems like a weird sort of term. From a beverage category that uses a lot of weird terms, and I'd rather, keep it kind of more basic and just let the flavors speak for themselves.
Nice. All right, good to know. See, I've already learned.
So brewer's perfect.
So Clint is
the
Valpo area where his meadery is at. If you haven't been there, it's worth checking out. And obviously, again, your state's a little bit different than us right now with things that are open. For everybody's For everybody's knowledge, the chat is open. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them up there. I'll wind up kind of moderating it for you. If you have something we get to, we'll go ahead and unmute you. But otherwise, we're going to start. I told you, Clint, we're going to talk a little bit about this mead that you just dropped. And we want to learn a little bit more just educationally about mead in general, about your place, about some of the things that you're doing. So, start us off. Tell us about this particular one.
Well, this particular mead is a little different in that, we're looking at pretty bold flavors that are not being delivered through berries, which a lot of times people will gravitate toward the berry sort of meads. And I think that makes sense because berries and honey, it works really well. And you can do a lot of other fun adjuncts to kind of play with the berries and the honey. But with this, we're looking at totally different fruits. some really cool tropical fruits. And kiwi isn't really used a whole lot in many beverages, from what I can tell. And I don't know off the top of my head if I've encountered a kiwi-based mead. So that's really what this is. It's a kiwi-based mead with passion fruit added. And the honey we used, which the honey will add like some different characteristics to it. The honey we are used here is orange blossom honey, which has citrus, floral, and sort of vanilla notes. And that works really, really well with the tropical fruits we used here too, which is pretty awesome.
So how did you wind up? Well, first of all, what's the process of making a mead?
Good question. And you know, if you ask that question to a bunch of mead makers, chances are you'll get as many different responses as you have mead makers. But there's a couple different basic techniques. One of the first common techniques was, at least as a result of the craft beer explosion here in the United States, and the home brewing really is what that was born out of. The home brewers initially would approach mead as if it were a beer. So they treat the honey as if it were more or less liquid malt extract. So they'd go through the whole process. They would heat it, they'd give it rest and that sort of thing. And there's some debate about, ultimately, you know, you're going to get a stable product, but you might lose some of the nuance of the honey with the boiling, because it tends to blow off a lot of the volatile, the softer notes through the volatile process. So then the other side of that is the no heat method. The idea is treat it more like wine. And with that, you'll capture a lot more of the nuance of the honey. And you don't have to have the whole process, the heat side. So you don't have to have, you know, heat involved, electricity or flame, whatever you're using. And that's the technique I more or less have used, is treating mead as if it were a wine, because really it is. So there's two schools. Now you can kind of change some of that. And then there's different ideas about when to add fruit, when not to add fruit, what honey to use. So those are the sort of things that go into, you know, constructing what a mead is. You want maybe complementary flavors, perhaps contradictory, to add some more interest. You know, that's going to be part of that artistic process and thinking about putting a mead together.
So I always describe
the basics of it.
I describe it as a honey wine. Is that a fair assessment when people ask me about what is mead or why should I care about it?
It is. And what we always describe it pretty basically is mead is a wine that's made with honey instead of grapes. So that's pretty accurate. The term honey wine might elicit some different responses, though. Some folks might, and for various reasons, we've at times had to describe it as honey wine, but sometimes that might evoke the concept of, hey, you made a wine and then you added honey to make it sweet, when in fact the honey is the fermentable sugar that's the sugar that the yeast is using to break down into the alcohol. So we're not making like a traditional wine and throwing honey on top of it just to sweeten it. It's honey through, unless we're stating there's another ingredient involved. So, you know, the perception can change depending on the term you use, but you know, really they're interchangeable.
What's the process like? A lot of us, you know, there's a lot of familiar faces here, I think, are relatively familiar with brewing. What's the process for mead like? What are you putting into what, you know, is the system similar to a brewing system? Sure. And how long does it take?
Like I said, it could be similar to a brewing system, and a lot of what our production looks like, it really looks like the cold side of a brewery. In other words, we don't have the, you know, we're not making wort, we're not mashing in, we're not doing any of that stuff. We kind of, after the hot side, then you see the cold side. So we do have some fermenting vessels. We also have some variable capacity. We have bright tanks. So a lot of that looks kind of similar. But in terms of thinking about it, really the basic process of mead is just honey, water, and yeast. So you dilute honey into a mixture that is able, that the yeast can attack. And basically what they do is they eat the sugar, they burp carbon dioxide, and they pee alcohol. So that's the basic process there. So the ratio can be, for example, per gallon, you'd probably be doing about 2.5 pounds per gallon. So if you're home brewing, do that equation, roughly 12.5 pounds of honey per 5-gallon batch, and that'll create a basic table mead.
How big a batch
and
is
you can even use, a lot of people will use just, what's that?
Go ahead, keep going.
And I was just saying that would just make a regular sort of just fun first time mead.
How much do you make in one batch?
It really depends on if we think it's going to sell really well, or if it's an experiment. So we've done typically smallest batch or about a half a barrel, so about 15 gallons. But we try to be more in the 30-gallon range, and that's just because our smallest bright tank, which is what we ultimately will condition the mead in, is 1 barrel. So about 30 gallons is ideal for us as far as the small batch. Now, from up there, we can go pretty big. We did, for example, it turned out to be an 11-barrel batch with a baseball bat. So about 330 something gallons. That's a pretty big batch. We spend a day bottling.
Now you mentioned water.
So it kind of depends.
Jammy AF, you don't use any water in, do you?
No, we don't. And there's a number of other meads we don't. And part of the concept of that was that we were, that you got that sweet. Yeah, that's a good mead there. So with that, we thought, well, what if we press all the fruit? Last one.
Last one.
Well, someone's going to be knocking on your door here soon. Yeah. The idea was really, what if we, instead of using water, we use juice? And of course, we want to make it more artisanal than that. So we press our own juice too. So we have a big bladder press, and we dump all the fruit in, and then through water, it expands this bladder and it starts squeezing out the juice. So that's what we did with that one. And we do that with almost all the same old jam series. We've done that. And then we have a new mead coming up. I don't know how available it's going to be because it's kind of a experimental batch, but it's like a same old jam treatment with a baseball bat. So no water there. What is with a baseball bat if you treat it as if it were no water? And that's coming up next week for us.
That's awesome.
So yeah, a lot of times we'll basically make our own juice. And then what's cool about that also is, the cool thing about that also, just real quick, is a lot of times we'll take that discarded fruit, we'll freeze it, and then we'll pull it out and we'll use it for a different mead or a different cider. And that's how we've done a lot of our different ciders that have flavors in them, like our raspberry cider. It was as a result of the fruit we pressed. We didn't use the juice, but we used the discarded fruit. So all the seeds, the pressed fruit, almost as if it were a raisin, and it's like a fruit bark, and then we just throw it in.
I'll come back to that.
That's pretty cool.
You mentioned the cider. Derek, I unmuted you. So you mentioned some experimental stuff. So Derek, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, excuse me. Good evening. Just curious, what have you had a real bad experience or I'll never use that again moment with any ingredients?
Yeah, we have. Actually, a couple different ones. And there's some that because I try to experiment and taste fruit, and if I see something unusual, I'll buy it. So for example, we bought a jackfruit. And if you're familiar with jackfruit, it's kind of a big fruit that looks like almost an armadillo. So we cut that thing open, and it's just, to me, smelled like rancid meat. So that's something, and the texture was really weird. I guess a lot of people use it for pulled pork substitute. So jackfruit, no, for us, for sure. Strawberries, I will use again. However, we won't use them through a fruit press. We did a fruit pressing of it, and the fruit just doesn't hold together enough, so it just squeezes out as if it's Play-Doh. And basically, the pressing of strawberries took us 3 days, and it was not good. So I would never do that. We'll puree. What we're doing now is pureeing our own strawberries instead of using the fruit press. Other fruits, probably, yeah, there's a couple others that I'm not a fan of. But those strawberries definitely, and no jackfruit ever. Oh, pawpaws too. I should mention that one because they're a pain in the butt to work with. You can never get enough of them ripe at any particular time in order to use it in any sort of meaningful way. So it's just a matter of rotating pawpaws in and out, and it just wasn't worth it. Have you ever had pawpaws before?
Only in some saisons.
No pawpaws for anyone?
Actually had the fruit.
Can't say I have.
What fruit, Clint, are you dying to try to
Yeah,
experiment?
pawpaw. I think Upland maybe did a pawpaw one, right?
Yeah, and Afterthought has used it in some saisons, I know.
I don't know if it's considered a fruit, but Tamarind. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Tamarind is really interesting to me. It's a fruit I haven't used. I'd like to play with watermelon. Tamarind.
Okay.
It's kind of it's more of an Indonesian. It's almost like a nut, but like a fruit. I don't know if I'm doing it justice. I'm very interested in working in, some other ones. I think I'd like to go back to black raspberry. I'd like to do watermelon, maybe cucumber.
Mm.
And I'd like to go back and do another tomato mead. We did a tomato mead a couple of years ago.
A tomato mead. How does that work? What's the flavor?
The last time we did it with basil. It does have a note of tomato to it. There's no doubt, almost like a roasted tomato. But it tends to be, it's a golden, beautiful mead wine. And it tends to have some really nice citrus notes. And then, like I said, almost like a cooked tomato sauce sort of vibe to it. And we did add basil to it as well.
Okay.
I'd like to do that. Those are some things I'd like to play with again.
How long does it take from start to finish?
But I like those too. That can vary. Sometimes we'll do something and it'll finish in like 6 weeks, and other times it'll take forever. And you just never know. You held up the Jammy a moment ago, and we did a big enough batch where it went into 2 fermenting vessels. The weird thing is that they acted different, even though it was the exact same ingredients going in. So we released the first batch of that already, and we just bottled the second batch of that. So, the first run of that, I think it was almost 6 weeks of Jammy, and I think it took 7 weeks for the second vessel, and then the third vessel, well, it just finished. So, it took over 3 months.
Okay.
So you just never know. Now, in terms of the longest one, we still have an original mead sitting in a barrel from when we started.
Oh, wow. How long has that been?
So that's been over 4 years. So it's in a oak barrel, and we just make sure the top's done. We're just experimenting with it to see what happens. It's probably not good.
Only one way to find out. We have Chris is watching on Facebook Live too. He asked about gluten-free. Is meat?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is. You could certainly make it so it isn't gluten-free by adding in some ingredients, but typically if something's identified as mead, it's not going to have any grain or anything like in that. So yes, it's gluten-free.
Awesome. Now you mentioned a little bit about using some of the spent fruit on other things. You got into cider too. How did you get the idea to do that?
Yeah, it wasn't something I invented. I recently read there's a whole other process with it that's traditionally used in wine. But it was just, we were making the black raspberry mead approximately a year and a half ago, and the black raspberries are so expensive. And we had just pressed it, and I was like, this is a shame about this fruit that we're going to throw it all away. And so I just grabbed some, and I had a bite of it, and it still tasted sweet and had a lot of berry flavor in it. So I thought at that moment, like, well, we have a cider that we just started. Let's throw it in there and see what happens. Worst case scenario is it doesn't work out. So that kind of changed things for us when we realized we could kind of get a little extra mileage out of our fruit. And that black raspberry cider was pretty incredible. A lot of people said it tasted like a mead. So we need to get back and do a little bit more of that. We've kind of refiguring how we're going to do our ciders. Our mead game's just taken off so much that it makes more sense for us to focus on it right now. But ultimately, we're going to have to come back to our cider and kind of think about how that works with us.
We're going to come back to the cider. Eric, I got you open because you got a question I think we may have talked about in the shop earlier today.
Yeah, so I got two questions about drinking mead. So first one is, at what temperature do you drink it? Do you drink it room temperature, or do you chill it? And then the second part of my question is, once you open it,
sure,
how long can you leave it before like can it last a couple days as long as you cork it back up, or do you need to drink it all right away?
Sure, good questions. I would say in terms of temperature, what we normally serve our mead at is around 52 degrees. So what that would mean is to stick it in the fridge for an hour and a half or so, and then pull it out. And then we kind of like the process from going from a light chill to room temperature, because it tends to kind of unfold different characteristics of the mead. When it's a little cooler, you might notice one thing, but once it gets up to a warmer temperature, you might start noticing a lot of different characteristics. So that's kind of what I would say about room temperature. About how long to drink it, if it's a still mead, I would say that you should be able to keep that for a week or so. I found that mead, for whatever reason, it will stay a lot longer than a wine. And maybe that's because we're not mass producing it for quick consumption. This is a little bit more artisanal we're doing. Now, if it's carbonation, then that's a different game. If it's carbonated mead, like a beer, you want to drink it relatively fast. So that's it in a nutshell there. But yeah, I like to have it a little bit chilled and then let it warm up a bit.
All right, you mentioned the cider, and man, you have a medal to your name from FOBAB for gold medal for barrel-aged cider. Did you ever expect to win a gold in that category? Yeah. And tell us about that one, because that was it was one of my favorites at that event for sure.
Awesome. I appreciate that. First of all, I started going to FOBAB years ago, well before I was brewing even. I was just, another simple middle-aged craft beer geek, kind of chasing the festivals, chasing beers. So I think I went to my first FOBAB in 2009. That's been 11 years ago, and I went every year for a few years. It was really cool. But once I started going, and then professionally, that was, to me, I felt like, hey, I've made it. I'm at FOBAB. I didn't have to win anything. I was there. So that was really cool. In terms of winning something, we tried for it the first couple of years. We tried to make decisions and put meads in that we thought might do well, and they didn't, although people liked them. And so this last year we decided, well, screw it. I'm just put stuff in there that I like, that I think the people lining up will enjoy. And it was surprising, that we then won. The year we didn't care. And I almost didn't enter anything. I was like, whatever. We're just there for the, just to show the Chicago crowd what the local meadery, cidery is doing.
All right, Stephanie, I'm going to get to you in a minute. We're still on the ciders.
Yeah, I see that last question.
Caramel. So that was caramel apple in the barrel, right? Talk about how that one came about, because that one flew off of our shelves, just the regular version in the fall. It's delicious.
Yeah. Sure. I think the caramel apple cider, the initial idea for that was from my wife, who is also my partner in the company, Jill. And she often comes up with a lot of ideas. And I think caramel apple cider really is, that's to her credit. And so we made that the first year when we were open, 2016. It was very successful. And each year it seems like it gets more and more traction, to the point where, like last year, I don't remember how much our sales were, but it was an insane amount we sold that first month. And the first day, I think we went through 900 bottles out of our shop. It's something like that. So each year it gets a little crazier. So it made sense. I mean, some people had said, age that. Well, I'd never done a cider in a barrel, so I didn't know what was going to happen. Cider, like a regular beer, is a little bit lower in alcohol, so therefore it's more susceptible to issues that you might see resulting from aging something in a wood vessel. But I gave it a shot, so I did it with this, and sure enough, it turned out really well. And so my first barrel-aged cider won FOBAB. It's pretty, I did not expect that, so it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Stephanie.
But what's funny is we thought we had a chance of getting another one, because we also bought our raspberry marshmallow coconut aged on oak, and that was awesome too. So we were surprised. I don't know. On one hand, we were surprised, but it was like we could have won two, really. People's choice.
In due time. Stephanie's got a really good question, actually. It's one that I've always wondered as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been at Orange and Brew many a time. I sell the bottles of mead. They're great. They taste fantastic. But I always see that it's like X amount. Let's say like $10 for X amount of milliliters. I always wonder why is it so highly priced for such small amounts. I looked at the site and I noticed that your mead was actually really affordable in comparison to a few other ones that are on there. What, in your opinion, dictates the price of mead typically? And then also, why are yours more affordable than a lot of other ones that I've seen? It's a good thing.
Those are good questions. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You think so? For us, and what their question really strikes a lot of things about what Misbehavin Needs is. What we want to do is we want to be an affordable option that gets you a very good flavor. So good value is really important to us. I mean, that's how we shop too. But in terms of the pricing, I think you look at a couple of different things. Honey itself is pretty expensive. So as a fermentable sugar, that's an expensive ingredient. A lot of times a brewer will use honey. They'll say that's the most expensive ingredient they use. So sometimes when we make a mead, believe it or not, honey might be the cheapest thing. So you're going to see prices go up from there. We try to base everything on our ingredients and our materials, which is why you see our prices tend to be a little bit more down to earth. I do think there's some meaderies who look more in terms of supply and demand. In other words, well, there's a big demand for mead, there's not a big supply, so therefore we can set this price, and that might work for them too. And that's kind of a balancing act. Sometimes we price things normally and there was a huge demand for it, so it sold so fast, and we're like, well, if we're a little bit more expensive, it could have slowed the spending down. So it's kind of a weird, debate that you have about these things. But I think our idea about basing everything on the materials and ingredients that go inside of it, to me, that makes sense, and we're going to stick with that.
Clint,
I love the question. Thank you.
Clint, you talked about being a beer geek at FOBAB. What made you decide to take the plunge into this?
Well, it's with the whole craft beer thing, and I know a lot of people experience this. You get involved in it, you love it, and it becomes a really important part of your life. And I've known a lot of great people through it, and I've drank a lot of great beer through it. So, to try to turn your passion into your job, that's a good thing. So yeah, that's really what it boils down to, is that there was a point where I thought, hey, this is what I like. My old job was kind of disappearing, and it was time to kind of make that leap. Now, I had thought, years ago about opening a brewery. I brewed it before. But with the amount of breweries, we thought, well, that doesn't really make so much sense, which is why people open a Slushy or something along those lines, right?
Those are the people who don't know how to brew.
But yeah, those who don't teach, those that can't do teach, right? But for us, I started making mead, and my beer group was starting to explore mead. So we thought, well, I thought, hey, I'm going to try that. And I made it for a while, and then I started giving samples out to my friends when I felt comfortable with it, my family as well. And everyone liked it. So that was kind of how that transition happened for me. And everyone said, you should do something with this. You should do something with this. And finally I was like, well, let's do something with this. And it wasn't we didn't know if it was going to succeed. We're thrilled the support we've gotten. So we're so appreciative of that.
How much mead did you drink before this, and how did you get yourself to the point?
I'm going to have another sip of mead. I drank quite a bit of mead. Now, in a way, though, we had to use our imagination because there wasn't a lot of meaderies that were working then. There was a handful, and it was hard to get a hold of. So we were tasting bee nectar. We were tasting stuff like New Day. I know Kunin was a really big meadery and brewery that was doing a lot of stuff that was interesting. And then Redstone a little bit, tried that sort of stuff. So those are really how we cut our teeth. And then we started finding other local weirder ones, like Dragon Mead in Warren and Cellarman's and other stuff like that. So yeah, that's how we first we were tasting the samples. Now, a lot of those aren't doing the stuff that we're doing. A lot of home brewers were starting to innovate at the same time. Some of my contemporaries who are home brewers, for example, like Chad Wilkes out of Garrett Geest. So you see like a lot of these home brewers are experimenting, and I think our generation of meaderies, which is probably the third generation, has really been super innovative, and the home brewers who are kind of behind us are doing some interesting stuff too.
I'm back. Sorry.
I see that one of my.
What? So
no,
what,
you're good. I held up the conversation.
You didn't have to. How did you get yourself educated on making mead?
No, it's no big deal. Well, a lot of it was trial and error, and then then I started really reading and researching it. Internet has a lot of information, but I tend to be more of an old school book guy. So I got a lot of books, and those were really helpful. But ultimately, I mean, I kind of was willing to experiment, and that's how I learned the most. And then I would kind of use my books as a reference to like, well, maybe you do it this way or that way. So I do think I have some formal training in that I've read so much about it, but really it's about me creating my own method and being the expert at my method. And that's kind of got me to where I am right now. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. And like I said earlier, you ask a bunch of different mead makers about doing something, they're somewhat different answers. That's the same thing here. They're going to have different techniques.
I'll ask Derek's question because we're going to get into, I want to talk about the experience at the meadery. Are you a brewery or a distillery as far as how you're categorized?
We're neither. We're actually considered to be a winery. And in Indiana, it's a small winery license we have. And so we're considered to be a farm winery, even though we're in the middle of the county seat, right across the street from the courthouse. So we're a farm winery.
What is the experience like when we come to Valpo?
But the experience, I don't know. Oh, as far as in the tasting room, yeah, sure. Well, traditionally, the way we used to do it, you'd have to be able to come into our tasting room and you'd be able to sample drinks and get bottles and drink there in-house. But now That's not really happening. I assume we're going to get back to that in the summer, but right now we'd recommend you order online, and we have pretty good descriptions and you can pick up the stuff. But you know, when we're going back into the summer and things are opened up, you'll be able to get a little bit more of that experience. You'll be able to sample some things, have some drinks. We don't serve food, and that's part of the reason why we aren't open, is because we don't serve food. But there's a lot of restaurants around downtown Valpo that you can, and they're very good. You can get food from them, and you can bring it into our place, and you can, you know, drink and eat that way. But the downtown Valpo is really cool, and there's a lot of concerts and stuff that traditionally happen in the summer, but we'll see what happens this year.
Do you put mead on draft at your place?
No, we typically have it on bottles, and we do larger bottles than what we sell to the public. That way we're opening fewer bottles, and the bigger bottles, believe it or not, the cheaper bottles. But we do have some on draft. Usually we'll have some experimental meads that are carbonated on draft. Right now, for example, we have a tangerine milk mead with vanilla beans that's on tap. It's called Tangerine Sunrise. So it's a tangerine milk mead.
Huh. So is that the change then? So if it's carbonated, you'll put it on. Obviously, the bottles are not carbonated, and they're done fermenting.
Right. Right. Well, you can put mead on tap, still mead. You'd probably push it, you know, put on a nitrogen system and probably push it with nitrogen. And that's something we've debated, but it's not something we've made that leap to, but it probably will happen sooner or later. So, and we normally do keg mead, believe it or not. Sometimes we'll not be sure what the format's going to be, so we'll just bulk kegs things, and it will sit there until we figure out what sort of bottle format it needs to be in. It gives us a little versatility.
How much do you usually have as far as a variety in the tap room when you're open for normal business?
Sure. I think normally we have about between 6 and 8 still meads. I think normally 1 or 2 carbonated meads, and normally 1 or 2 carbonated ciders. That's pretty typical. We do a lot of specialty items too. For example, a lot of times on Thursdays, we would bring back one of our older meads from our cellar, and we do a throwback Thursday. So you could have something we made 3 or 4 years ago, which is a pretty cool option. And we also do mead slushies in the summer too. So that's always something that gives a little variety.
How do you do that?
I think on the weekends, that's when we do it.
How do you do that? Not that I
would. Oh, I can't remember. Eric, ordering a slushy machine. There's all kinds of different, I recommend it. You should really get a slushy machine. They're a lot of fun. But you need to make sure you have the right glassware. We have these big tiki glasses, and we have umbrellas and bamboo straws. It's pretty top notch. But you know, there's different ways you can do that. You have to figure out kind of the freezing point of the liquid around the alcohol in order to make it more of a slushy. So I don't have that calculation in front of me, but we do have some numbers that we base everything off of. But it's a lot of fun. Just play with it, and I mean, eventually you get it. And what's that?
Are you blending it with anything else?
Oh, the slushies? Yeah, absolutely. We go wild with that. We'll take anything and mix it together. We've done some crazy things with the slushy machine. So, and I gotta give credit to my wife, Jill. She comes up with a lot of the ideas. And some other people have. And one time I made the thing they said to make, and she's like, wow, that's a great idea, everyone. And I was like, well, what about me? I made it. And she's like, you get all the credit anyway. I guess.
It is a partnership.
It's well deserved.
That's okay.
Yeah. But she does so much. So she comes up with a lot of the ideas, like for the slushies, and they do those.
What are the challenges you face? You're a small small brewer, you distribute yourself, you've got your tap room. What have been your biggest challenges as you got yourself off the ground 4 years ago?
Sure. Well, I think for us initially, when we first opened, the biggest challenge was letting people know what we're doing. And that still happens somewhat, but educating just the surrounding area and everyone in the region as to what Mead is, it took a lot more time, and we spent a lot more of our resources than I thought we would on that. So we had to explain what Mead is continually over and over. And now that doesn't really happen so much. Most of the people who come in, they'll have a sense about what we do and what we are. So I think strawberry basil slushie, that sounds good. Okay, that's Crystal, sweet. I thought I saw you on here. So I think initially that just educating people, not being sure that the meadery worked. And then part of it is, we started also kind of on a small budget. So we've had to be pretty careful about how we grew the business. Right now we're in a pretty good position where we have done that. Now we have resources so we can kind of reinvest, and we can expand our production, and we can, if we need something big done, we can do it, it's a good situation to be in right now. But yeah, those are, I think, maybe some of the if we could have done things differently, we probably would start with a little bit more cash, personally.
The story of every brewery.
We didn't do anything to raise them. Yeah, probably. That first day when you're making stuff and you're like, oh my God, we need to make more things.
What do you tell people? You talk about, educating people. How do you get them excited about this? What exactly do you tell them?
Well, a lot of times with us, the way we are, we don't want to tell people, we want to show them. So what we'll do is we'll pack all the flavors that we want into this glass, and we'll give it to the person, and we'll say, taste it. And if we list an ingredient, you're going to taste it. So I think a lot of times it's just letting the beverage speak for itself. That's the important thing. And if we say it's a peanut butter jelly mead, you're going to taste peanut butter and jelly. If we say it's going to be a passion fruit kiwi, you're going to taste this stuff. So, that's the most important part. But so either people are going to like it or they aren't.
So you need to do, all right, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'll tell anybody, but I texted you the other day because I was bored here, and I started mixing your baseball bat meads with Bourbon County Stout, and it was life-changing.
Oh, yeah.
When are we going to get a collaboration with you and a brewery?
We do have those, and we had a bunch lined up with some pretty cool places. Saint Laurent and is going to do a collaboration with us, which I'm excited about. There's other ones too. Barntown over in Des Moines, we're doing a collaboration with them, but that's on a hiatus. Bee Nectar, which is an incredible collaboration for me. I love Brad and everything he's done for us and for the industry. So we're supposed to do a collaboration with them. And then there's a couple of places out of Florida that are, people will know who those are. But so we have those sort of things. So there are plans, and it's going to happen. So you're going to taste some stuff later on this year, I think.
Nice. I'm excited about that. Stephanie, I think this is a fair question too.
I want to know, what should I be pairing with my mead? If I'm sitting down drinking some mead, what foods should I be pairing to bring out the best notes?
Yeah, that's good. What I really recommend is pretty basic foods that are more or less ingredients, kind of building blocks of things. So I'd say like nuts, cheeses, fruits, bread. Those are the sort of things I'd really recommend. And, if you want to throw in like a cured meat or something like that too, I mean, that would work as well. But have fun with it, and you can also bring in like honey and stuff like that with some cheese and some bread, and then try mead with that. It's a great combination. So I'd say keep it basic and stick with those sort of things, and you'll have a lot of fun with it.
Derek,
We can definitely do that.
tell us your favorite drink first.
I go to a gin and tonic.
Fair.
That's it.
Well, ask your question.
I want to know, Clint, what is your go-to drink besides mead?
Well, I'm a beer guy, so, and I do like the hazies. I got the hazy crazies. I'd say in Chicago, I love the breweries in Chicago. There's so many good ones right now. One exciting time to be a beer fan and be in Chicago. There's so many to mention, but some of my favorites are like Tamarind, Phase 3, of course. I like Riverlands, you know, and even like other places that are kind of coming up. For example, the Foreign Exchange, which is pretty cool, Brothership, a lot of good stuff.
Where's Joe at? Joe, are you on? There you are. This is an interesting question. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, Clint. Thanks again for everything. I went to school at Valpo a while ago, and since I graduated, the downtown area has really developed in terms of the breweries and bars and restaurants. How has the college crowd responded to your mead?
Good question. We've had some of the people from the college, you know, especially like law school students and some of the, they were pretty into it for a while, and some of the graduate students. It kind of depends on if someone from the college is willing to go out and to try things in downtown, and sometimes that doesn't happen because the campus can be a little insulated. But we have had some come out and really support us. That's been pretty cool. Sure, we'd like to see a little bit more, but there's also some faculty members who have really embraced us too, and they're good people and good customers. So I would say probably not a big impact on us, but hasn't hurt us either. You know, and that the college is here, well, that certainly helps us.
Sure.
You have a membership program, don't you, Clint? How many people are in that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think we keep that fairly low. I think it's around 100, but if I'm not mistaken, we're planning a new bottle club through Vino Shipper, which is basically a third party that deals with shipping for us across the country. And so we're kind of in that process of deciding what we want to do with that. And that might be of interest to people who, you know, aren't in the Chicago area, who want to try our mead. So that's going to be something that's going to be kind of cool, I think.
What's next for you guys? I know things are up in the air with the stay-at-home stuff and people being scared to leave the houses, but what do you aspire to be doing next in the next 6 months?
Sure. Well, I don't know if people are scared. Based on what we're seeing here in Valpo, everyone's out in the streets, that's for sure. But for us, you know, we want to really kind of go through the summer and maximize what we think is going to be a good time during the summer. And traditionally, we do really well in the summer. And then we have some ideas about things we want to get ready for the holidays. So those are the things we're focusing on. For me personally, as far as I want to see with the meadery, I do want to see our collabs that we had to kind of scuttle and postpone. I want to see all those happen. We have some great ones lined up, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of the nicer beer festivals rescheduled, because that's an important way for us to reach out and reach to customers. And it's disappointing us not having those, because, you know, we take those seriously. We try to bring our best mead there to impress people and to bring new customers in, and not just for us, also to expand understanding what good mead is. You know, that's important to us. So hopefully we'll be able to get back and get some of those beer festivals going again. So those are wish list things, but we got some good ideas for meads coming up this year, and no shortage of ideas. It's actually trying to figure out which ones to make. That's the hard part.
All right, Cratchell has a question. I'm thinking this is going to be a setup for you, but go ahead and ask.
Hi, Clint.
Yeah.
What's the favorite you have made so far?
you know, there's a few that I've really loved, and for different reasons. You know, that's tough. As far as the ones I love to drink, 20 has a very special place for me because, well, first of all, I mean, I just thought the flavors were so good, and the whole process was a very cool mead to make. But it also is, you know, that was my anniversary present to Jill. It was the idea of making a mead, and so that turned out really, really well. And it's still tasting great. So that's a favorite of mine. It's kind of hard to pick though. You know, the original Greedo was great. I love that mead. You know, and the Big Black series, I've really enjoyed all of those, and you know, also so there's so much that I've liked, but I'd say probably 20 has been my favorite one. Yeah, Greedo is coming back. We are going to release a strawberry version of Greedo, believe it or not, in the next couple of weeks. So Greedo is our margarita style mead, and we have a bunch in tequila barrels. So that's our biggest summer release is going to be Greedo. I think it's 3 52-gallon barrels of Greedo is going.
That sounds
so it's going to be a big batch.
Pretty darn good to me.
They probably see distribution too.
That's great. Hey, I promised Clint we'd keep them to an hour. Clint, what are we missing? What else do you want to share with us? What have I not asked?
I don't know. You didn't ask about me skateboarding when I was a kid, so I kind of missed out on that. If I used to. No, I mean, I think we covered on a lot of good things. Yeah, I'd say try to drink your mead typically within 10 days. That would be my thing. Oh, and a very cute dog. If you want to hold on for a second. Hey, Howie, come here. Come here, buddy. Come here. Come here. It's not a trick. Come here. Come here. I'll get him. Come here, Howie. Okay, fine.
They don't ever listen to you when you not want them to.
No, he's driving me nuts. I was grilling out earlier. He's barking and attacking me, and now that I wanted to come in my lap, hell with me, you know.
Clint, man, thank you so much for joining us today. This was awesome. We had a lot of people come in this week asking some of these same questions, and they were curious. They came and bought some of your stuff. We've got a loyal following for all of your stuff for sure, and we're trying to grow it. We're trying to get more.
I appreciate that.
Learn about it. So this is a huge help.
Oh, we got him. Okay, here we go. Look at that guy.
Oh, cute.
That's my. Yeah, he's a good boy. There we go. So we got the shot. That's our mascot right there. Hey, we're gonna take a walk in a minute.
Brewery dog. Very nice.
Oh yeah.
All right, Clint.
Hashtag, right?
Thank you very, very much. We're looking forward to actually being open and have you in the bar so we can talk with you here in person, sample some of your stuff, and really get back to seeing all these faces. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
And I have a great collab idea for us.
Go on.
I'll tell you about it later.
Fair enough. All right, guys. Hey, everybody have a great weekend.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.